few things on the board for you. Let's start with this one. UGA wide receiver London Humphreys. Still going to be a game time decision, but he could potentially be out of Saturday's game with mono. One of the things that we talked about in the first segment is how much has Bobo held back. Now, London Humphreys had 2 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown in the Clemson game. We haven't really seen him do much since. I thought that this was going to potentially be a game where we could see a player like Kim shine, but now someone else is going to have to step up in his place because I doubt we're going to see him in Tuscaloosa on Saturday.
There's no need to doubt it. He has been ruled out for Saturday's game against Alabama. It was on the availability report last night. Another wide receiver found his name on there, Sokovie White, as well, a freshman. I wasn't expecting much from Sokovie going into this game, but you wonder about this Georgia wide receiver position. Look, I think perimeter blocking is part of the reason London Humphreys hasn't been able to get on the field more consistently for Georgia, and that's going to put a lot more on the plate of Arian Smith, a guy who made a big catch last year against Alabama, an explosive play guy. Can he be more consistent? Can he have 3-4 catches in this game in addition to stretching the field vertically? So I think this Georgia wide receiver position in particular, now with no London Humphreys out due to mono, no Sokovie White with an undisclosed injury potentially, I wonder what we're going to see from this group and wonder how this even puts a bigger spotlight on Georgia's tight ends as well.
Moving on, our new co-defensive coordinator, Travaris Robinson, returning to his former team where he was on the defensive staff at Alabama. I mean, how much can he really give any insight into this team? A lot of the players are gone. The coaching staff is different. Is there anything that Travaris Robinson can bring to the table that's going to give Georgia some sort of edge?
I think that's a little bit overblown. Alabama did have 10 defensive backs from last year's roster that are no longer on this team. So in terms of that position group, it might be a little tough. And for as much as Travaris coached there and knows the players on that team and knows that environment and building, Georgia recruited a lot of those guys as well, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. So I think what Travaris Robinson brings to this game, it helps Georgia more so than it is a negative for Alabama in that game. We've seen coaches switch sides beforehand. And so I think going into this game for T-Rob in particular, how do you go about slowing down Ryan Williams? A 17-year-old is a really strong pass catcher so far, 10 catches, 285 yards, and 4 touchdowns. How Robinson's back end safeties and cornerbacks go about slowing down Ryan Williams, I think is going to go a long way in possibly determining who wins this game, because for as much turnover as Alabama's had on the defensive side of the ball, Ryan Williams aside, I don't think that Alabama is as good at the wide receiver position this year as they were last year when they had Jermaine Burton, when they had Isaiah Bond as well.
Well, one thing's for certain. We know that Coach Robinson understands the intensity of this game on both sides. So excited to see what he does on Saturday. Now, Dan Lanning, not with Georgia anymore, but still managing to find a way to help him. Kirby Smart, Kaylee DeBoer have never faced at any level. Dan Lanning was 0-3 against DeBoer when he was at Washington. I'm curious to see. I mean, I know we're never going to get to hear the conversation, but I feel like DeBoer is more of an offensive guy where Kirby is a defensive guy. So it's nice to know that Kirby can reach out to his good friend Dan Lanning and still get some help in this game.
Yeah, I'm interested in sort of what Dan has told Kirby there. You know, they played them twice last year. Oregon was favored in both games and lost both times. Kaylee has more success in the Connor Kaylee showdowns than Dan Lanning has had against Kaylee DeBoer. So from that standpoint, I don't know. And like, look, Kirby Smart knows a lot about football. He is one of the smartest and best coaches in this game. And so a lot of these things he's going to be able to figure out and pick up on his own there. So I'm really interested in seeing how this sort of matchup goes. Obviously, so much of this rivalry is baked around Nick Saban and Kirby Smart for years. And so we're sort of entering a new era where there is no real history with Kaylee DeBoer. And based off what I've seen from Kaylee DeBoer this week in terms of press conferences and things like that, he doesn't have much interest in sort of leaning into the wrestling aspects that come with this. There's no drama with him. There's no theatrics with him. He's very plain, very vanilla. And so I wonder how that plays into where this rivalry moves going into the future.
You see my face right now? This is my I'm sick of it face. Okay? Showdown comment too soon. We can circle back to that next week. But for now, let's move on to this. Some weird things have been happening this week with opt-outs. Starting with the UNLV quarterback, I believe Matthew Sluka, put out a statement on Twitter that said that he was going to utilize his redshirt year and opt out of all additional games due to certain representations that were made to him and were not upheld after he enrolled. Now, keep in mind, UNLV off to a 3-0 start, so we can only assume that UNLV promised him a certain amount of money, that maybe wasn't met. But then, in a turn of events, the Rebels athletic program is claiming that Sluka's actions were instead an attempt to cash in on a hot start and wanted to receive more money than they negotiated on. I mean, this sounds like a script to a movie. I feel like we're going to see a lot more information come out on this. And we'll talk about Bear Alexander in a minute, but Connor, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we had to talk Kaylee into doing this show today. She was trying to opt out, looking for more money. But, fortunately, us here at DawgNation at Large, Cody, myself, our wonderful producers back in Atlanta, we're able to keep Kaylee. And we're excited. We've had a great start to the season, and we're eager to keep building off of what we've built here at DawgNation at Large.
That has nothing to do with the question that I just asked you about this in particular. I will give you the chance to answer it one more time.
Yeah, look, this is something I think, unfortunately, this is just the reality of modern college football. There's no good guy in this story. I think both UNLV and Sluka aren't exactly the heroes that they envision themselves to be. It sounds like there's some confusion about one assistant coach and his involvement there. And this isn't going to be a one-off. I think this is something we're going to continue to see. You've sort of already seen it with Bear Alexander at USC. And so, it's an interesting story. I wonder how much of this is driven by the fact that it's 3-0 UNLV. If this is an 0-3 team, is there one, is this even happening? And two, is there even the same level of interest? Because I know it does frustrate a lot of people to see, a guy opt out. Now, granted, Sluka just got there this offseason, transferring in from Holy Cross. And so I think that makes it maybe a little bit different in terms of a guy that has been with a team for years. But I think that this is just the new reality of college football. And at the end of the day, I think this sucks for the general fan more so than anyone from the UNLV or Matthew Sluka camps.
Well, he was not the only player to opt out of the rest of the season this week. The former UGA defensive lineman Bear Alexander, who is now at USC, also announced that he would be utilizing his redshirt year, opting out of the rest of the year after he only played 21 snaps versus Michigan. This is no tea, no shade. I'm serious. I don't think I have seen a player yet in the post-NIL era that has left Georgia and has been better off. I don't know that much about math, but I do recognize that there's a common denominator here.
I mean, I thought Jermaine Johnson had a better career at Florida State after he transferred out. Again, sometimes, there are examples of that. I'm not saying everyone that leaves Georgia goes on to have a worse career elsewhere, but I think with Bear Alexander, you look at his career, he was at a different high school every year, and then he was at Georgia for 1 year, and then he was at USC for 1 year, flirted with the transfer portal back in April, and now, looks to be on his way out once again. Again, he wants to start, he wants to play a lot of snaps. It sounds like he wants to have his cake and eat it too. And you'll wonder just about the work ethic and the things that are going on in there. Like, this guy has been a headache at every stop that he has been at. And at a certain point, you no longer look at the programs and look at the individual there, or the parties involved with this. With USC, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And that's what has happened here with Bear Alexander. And I am sure that there are Georgia fans out there that are thrilled to no longer have this Bear Alexander headache, even with what he potentially brings as a talented defensive lineman. But Kaylee, do you know that he had more sacks in his 1 year at at Georgia than his entire USC career?
Did not know that specifically, but not surprised by that.
Yeah, so it just sort of speaks to where he is and who he is. An incredibly, talented prospect, a guy with tons of potential, but he has just seemed never to be able to get out of his own way and realize that potential.
Yeah, I mean, the clear difference with Sluka possibly opting out because of money, Bear Alexander opting out because he wasn't getting the playing time that he was promised in the first place. I have a feeling that we're going to be covering many stories like this in the future, and this is just the beginning of a very long stretch. Let's wrap things up on Dog Bites with this. College Game Day. No surprise that they're coming to Georgia, Alabama. Nick Saban's homecoming. I think a lot of Georgia fans are anticipating that this is just going to end up being one big Nick Saban love fest, and that's to be expected. But I'm very curious to see how the other people on the panel approach this game. Is everybody going to take Alabama? Is Nick Saban going to take Alabama? There's a lot to to question, but as a Georgia fan, I would not expect it to be unbiased.
Yeah, I think if you're a Georgia fan watching this, maybe you'll find something else to do. Look, College Game Day, I just think has shown that it is no longer a program for the Georgia football program, or at least for fans of the Georgia football program. And we can go down the line here and look, like the David Pollock thing is the David Pollock thing. ESPN has continued laying off personalities left and right. Pat McAfee has long had issues with the Georgia fan base. Some of that you can understand because I think he was wrongly blamed for the ESPN decision to let David Pollock go, but he has held that grudge and gone at Georgia fans and had a back and forth with Georgia fans. And part of that is just his personality. This is the first game that Kirk Herbstreit has worked with Georgia since the Dylan Raiola comments that came out last February. You wonder how cuddly Georgia fans are with Kirk Herbstreit there. I am compelled to point out that Reese Davis, who I actually think does a fantastic job.
Me too.
Do you know where he went to college, Kaylee?
I'm envisioning it. I've heard it before. I've read it before. But now that we're sitting here in this moment, all I can think about is not where he went to school. But I feel like one time when I had to sit in on a slum for Reese Davis, we basically had like a staring contest, and I was the first one to blink. So that's all that's coming to my mind right now. Not where he went to school.
Reese Davis went to the University of Alabama and graduated from there. And then you obviously have the Nick Saban aspect of it all. So I expect a lot of love to be praised on Nick Saban. I think a lot of national media types are going to pick Alabama to win this game based off what we saw from Georgia against Kentucky. Yeah. So if you're a Georgia fan of Game Day, Game Day is no longer the program that it used to be. It's no longer the, I think, embrace of college football. There are a lot of more egos, and it is more individual driven now than it used to be. And so, find something else to do. Watch our lovely DawgNation pregame show that'll be on a little later in the day, or watch many of our wonderful videos that we have put out over the course of the week.
I could not have said it better myself. Skip out on College Game Day. Watch DawgNation Game Day at 5:30 on Saturday.